The transmission came through at 3:47 hours Earth Standard Time. I remember because I was in the middle of a nightmare, the same one I'd been having for 11 years, ever since the Martian uprising. In the dream, I'm back in the Olympus Mons Trench, my squad pinned down, watching the red dust turn black with blood. The same faces, the same screams. Then the alarm cut through everything, and I was awake, cold sweat soaking through my regulation sheets, my hand already reaching for the weapon I kept under my pillow. "General Cross," the AI voice said, calm and neutral, the way only machines can be when they're about to turn your entire existence upside down. "Priority Alpha transmission from the Galactic Council. Authentication code, Theta 79er Gamma." I sat up, rubbing my face. Theta 79er Gamma. That wasn't just priority. That was drop everything and listen, or we all die priority. The last time I'd heard that code was during the Rigel incident, when an entire system nearly collapsed into a singularity. "Patch it through," I said, my voice still rough with sleep. The holographic display flickered to life in the center of my quarters. The figure that materialized was tall, impossibly thin, with skin that shifted through colors like oil on water. I'd learned enough about galactic species to recognize a Voltari ambassador, the diplomatic corps of the Council, known for their neutrality and their ability to see multiple sides of any conflict. "General Cross," the Voltari said, its voice somehow managing to convey urgency despite its usual diplomatic calm. "I am Ambassador Xylos. I apologize for the hour, but time is not a luxury we possess." I swung my legs out of bed, grabbing my command jacket from the back of a chair. "What's the situation?" "The Draken Horde has broken through the Helix Nebula defense perimeter. They are advancing toward the core systems. The Council's combined fleets have suffered 73% casualties in the last rotation alone." I stopped mid-motion, my jacket half on. The Draken Horde wasn't just another alien threat. They were the reason the Galactic Council had formed in the first place, a species of biological horrors that consumed entire planets, converting organic matter into more of themselves. They'd been held back for centuries, contained beyond the nebula. If they were through. "What's that got to do with Earth?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Humanity was the newest member of the Council, only admitted 43 years ago after we proved we could defend our own system against a rogue AI uprising. We were considered primitive by galactic standards, our technology laughable compared to the ancient races. "General, the Council has observed your species. Unique capabilities," Xylos said, and I caught something strange in its voice. "Was that fear? We require assistance." "Assistance," I repeated flatly. "You need our ships, our weapons. We've got nothing that compares to what you've already lost." "No, General, we need your soldiers." The holographic display shifted, showing footage I'd seen 1,000 times before. Human soldiers in close combat, moving with a speed and ferocity that seemed almost supernatural. There was footage from the Martian uprising, from the lunar defense, from the brief but brutal conflict with the scavenger syndicate that had tried to raid our outer colonies. But there was also footage I didn't recognize. Camera angles from positions that couldn't have existed, showing human soldiers fighting in conditions that should have killed them. There was one clip, I'd remember it forever, of a single human soldier, a woman in battered armor, taking on a squad of Cathar warriors barehanded. She'd broken 3 of them before they'd brought her down, and even then she'd taken one of their officers with her. "What you see," Xylos continued, "is the product of your species' unique biology, your adaptability, your capacity for violence, your willingness to sacrifice. These are traits the Council has always found concerning." "Concerning," I said again, and this time I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. "You've kept us on the sidelines for 43 years because you find us concerning, and now you want us to fight your war." "We need humanity's strongest soldiers," Xylos said simply, "Earth's most feared killers." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to think about. "I'll need to consult with Earth Command," I said finally. "This isn't a decision I can make alone." "You have 4 hours," Xylos said. "The Draken will reach the first inhabited system in 5 rotations." The display went dark, and I stood there in the dim light of my quarters, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Fear, but not for myself, for what we might have to become. Earth Command convened in the Antarctic Defense Complex, 12,000 meters beneath the ice. It was a place designed to survive any apocalypse, and right now, it felt like the apocalypse was knocking on our door. I'd been in the military for 42 years, but I'd never seen the Joint Chiefs look like they did that morning. Admiral Chen was pale, his normally unflappable composure cracked. General Okonkwo kept rubbing his temples like he had a headache that wouldn't quit. And General Vasquez, the youngest of us, had the look of someone who'd seen a ghost. "Marcus," General Okonkwo said as I entered the war room, "tell us what you saw." I gave them the full briefing, the Draken breakthrough, the Council's desperation, the footage they'd shown me. When I was done, the room was silent for a long moment. "This is a trap," Admiral Chen said finally. "They've wanted to study us for years. This is just their excuse to get our best soldiers off-world, dissect them, figure out what makes us tick." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they really are desperate enough to ask for help from the species they've been keeping at arm's length." "The Draken aren't just a threat to the Council," Vasquez said, her voice quiet but steady. "If they break through the core systems, they'll eventually reach Earth. We're not that far out on the galactic arm. It's just a matter of time." "Vasquez is right," I said. "This is our war too. The Council is just asking us to fight it earlier than we'd planned." "With what?" Admiral Chen demanded. "We don't have the ships for a galactic war. We barely have the ships for system defense." "They don't want our ships," I said. "They want our soldiers, ground troops, the kind of soldiers who can turn the tide of a planetary siege, the kind who don't know how to quit." I pulled up the footage Xylos had shown me, adding some files of my own. The room fell silent as the holographic display showed combat footage from 3 centuries of human conflict: urban warfare in the Middle East, trench warfare on Mars, zero-G combat in the asteroid belt, hand-to-hand fighting that would make the ancient gladiators weep with envy. "Genghis Khan's Mongols," I said, pointing to a tactical projection. "The Spartans, the Roman legions, the samurai, the Green Berets, the Spetsnaz. Every culture, every era, we've produced warriors who were the best at what they did, and the galaxy is about to find out why." "Marcus, you can't be serious," Chen said. "We're talking about sending humanity's most dangerous people, the ones we've been trying to rehabilitate and control for generations, out into the galaxy. You're going to give them weapons and tell them to go be themselves." "Exactly," I said, and I saw the understanding dawn on Vasquez's face. "You mean the incarcerated," she said slowly. "The ones we couldn't rehabilitate. The ones we've been keeping locked up because they were too dangerous to be in society." "The most feared killers on Earth," I confirmed. "The ones who have been sitting in maximum security facilities for decades, being studied, being treated, being told they're broken. But they're not broken. They're just different, and we've been trying to force them into a mold they don't fit." "I can't believe I'm hearing this," Okonkwo said. "You want to arm the worst criminals in human history and send them to fight a war. What could possibly go wrong?" "Everything," I admitted. "But what's the alternative? We send regular soldiers, good men and women who have dedicated their lives to service, and we watch them die by the millions against a threat we don't understand. Or we send the ones who have been training their whole lives to be killers, and we give them a reason to use those skills for something other than destruction." I brought up a final image on the display. It was a prison facility, one of the most secure in human history, buried beneath the Australian outback. Inside were 147 men and women, each of them classified as too dangerous for general population. Each of them had a kill count that would make a battlefield general flinch. "This is our offer," I said. "We give them full pardons, freedom from incarceration, and a chance to be something more than what they've been told they are. They fight the Draken. If they survive, they never come back to Earth. They're given new identities, new lives on colony worlds where they can start over." "And if they don't survive?" Vasquez asked. "Then they die fighting something that deserves it more than the people they hurt here on Earth." The prison was called the Rig, and it was the most terrifying place I'd ever visited. Not because of the guards or the security measures, though those were impressive, but because of the people inside. I could feel them watching me as I walked through the corridors, their eyes following me through reinforced windows and pressured doors. They were predators, the kind who'd been born with something missing, something that made them see the world differently than the rest of us. Dr. Helena Morrison met me at the Central Processing Hub. She was the chief psychologist for the Rig, a woman who dedicated her life to studying the most dangerous minds in human history. "General Cross," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm for someone who spent most of her time analyzing psychopaths, "I've been briefed on your proposal." "Call it what it is, Doctor. I'm here to recruit killers." She nodded, her expression neutral. "That's one way to put it. Another way is that you're here to give the most difficult people in human history a chance to become heroes." "Can they become heroes?" I asked. "Or is that just a fantasy?" Dr. Morrison led me into an observation room, where a dozen screens showed different sections of the prison. She pointed to a screen showing a large, heavily muscled man packing in his cell. "Raymond Toland," she said, "former Special Forces, deserted, went rogue, killed 19 people in a single night. He's been in the Rig for 23 years. He's the closest thing we have to a success story. He's learned to control his outbursts, to channel his violence into structure and routine. But he's still a man who, when challenged, will respond with overwhelming force." "He sounds perfect," I said. She gave me a sharp look. "You don't understand what you're asking, General. These people aren't soldiers. They're not trained to follow orders. They're trained to survive, to dominate, to destroy. Giving them weapons and turning them loose on a galactic enemy might solve one problem, but it will create 1,000 more." "I'm not turning them loose," I said. "I'm giving them a mission, purpose, something to fight for that's bigger than themselves. And if they decide they don't want to fight for that, if they decide to turn on their handlers, or on each other, or on the people who have been holding them prisoner, then I'll deal with that when it happens." Dr. Morrison studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded toward the screen. "Start with Toland. If you can get through to him, you might have a chance with the others." The cell was sparse but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a small bookshelf filled with military history texts. Raymond Toland was standing at the window, his back to me, watching the red dust of the Australian outback. "I've been waiting for you," he said without turning around. "Word travels fast in this place." "Then you know why I'm here." He turned, and I got my first real look at him. He was bigger than he'd appeared on the screen, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they could crush steel. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they held a wariness that I recognized from years of dealing with traumatized soldiers. "You think you can turn us into heroes," he said. "You think you can give us a mission and suddenly all the blood on our hands becomes, what? Redemption." "I think you're better at killing than almost anyone on Earth," I said. "And I think the galaxy needs people who are good at killing. The question is whether you can use that skill for something other than destroying yourself." Toland laughed, but there was no humor in it. 23 years in this hole and no one's ever offered me a way out. Not because I deserve it, I know I don't, but because no one's ever needed what I can do. Now you show up, talking about aliens and galactic wars, and suddenly I'm useful again." "Useful is a good word," I said. You've spent 23 years being a problem for the human race. Now you've got a chance to be a solution. And if I say no, then you spend the rest of your life in this cell, and you die knowing that you could have been something more." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "They told me about the girl, the one who killed 3 of those alien bastards with her bare hands." "Kate Brennan," I said. "She's one of yours, classified as too dangerous to be in general population." "Show me the footage." I pulled up the clip on my wrist-mounted display and Toland watched it 3 times. When he was done, there was something new in his eyes. Respect. Hunger, I couldn't be sure. "She's better than me," he said finally. "She saw the fight differently. She didn't just fight them. She used their momentum against them, turned their own weight into a weapon. She's a natural." "So am I," he looked at me directly. "But I've had years to think about what I did, what I could have done differently, what I should have done. If you give me a chance, I won't waste it." "Then you're in." He nodded slowly. "I'm in, but I'm warning you, I'm not going to be a good soldier. I'm going to be what I am, a killer. The only question is who I kill." The transport ship was called the Harbinger, and it was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. A converted cargo hauler, retrofitted with enough cryopods to hold 200 passengers. It was designed for one purpose: getting our people to the fight. I stood in the main hold, watching as the prisoners were brought aboard in groups of 10. They came in chains, but the chains came off as soon as they were through the airlock. This was their moment of freedom, the first time in years for some of them that they'd walked without restraints. Dr. Morrison was beside me, running a handheld scanner over each prisoner as they entered. "Vitals are stable," she murmured. "Elevated adrenaline, but that's to be expected. They're scared, General. They're trying not to show it, but they're terrified." "Good," I said. "Fear keeps you alive. Fear also makes you unpredictable." I knew she was right. I'd seen what fear could do to soldiers: break them, drive them to madness, make them do things they'd never thought themselves capable of. But I was also counting on that. The Draken weren't going to be beaten by disciplined soldiers following orders. They were going to be beaten by people who'd already been broken and rebuilt into something harder, something more dangerous. The last prisoner through the airlock was Kate Brennan. She was smaller than I'd expected, compact, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. She moved like a predator, each step measured and controlled, and when she looked at me, I felt a chill run down my spine. "General," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "Lieutenant Brennan," I said, using the rank she'd held before her fall. "Welcome aboard." "I'm not a lieutenant anymore, not after what I did." "The council's pardon covers everything. You're being reinstated to your previous rank with full honors." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Full honors? That's rich. I killed my commanding officer, General. I broke his neck with my bare hands because he was ordering us into a suicide mission. I was supposed to be court-martialed, executed, but they locked me up instead because they wanted to study me." "I know. Do you? Do you know that I dreamed about it every night for the first 2 years? Waking up covered in sweat, reaching for his throat again, feeling his bones break under my fingers." "I know what it's like to kill someone," I said quietly. "I know what it does to you." She looked at me for a long moment and something shifted in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or kinship. "Then you know why I'm here," she said. "Not because I want to be, because there's nothing else for me." "That's not true," I said. "You're here because you're the best, and the galaxy needs the best." "I'm not sure I can be that person anymore." "You don't have to be, you just have to be yourself." The journey to the front took 47 standard hours. 47 hours of watching the prisoners, no, the soldiers, adjust to their new reality. 47 hours of wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I spent most of that time in the observation deck, watching the stars blur past at impossible speeds. The Voltari had given us access to their jump drives, which meant we were crossing distances that would have taken years in Earth-standard ships. It was a reminder of how small we were, how insignificant our technology was compared to the ancient races. But it was also a reminder of how dangerous humanity had become. The Draken had been a terror for millennia, but they'd never encountered anything like us. We were newcomers to the galactic stage, primitive and violent, but we were also adaptable in ways that seemed to frighten even the Council. "General," the voice came from behind me, and I turned to find Raymond Toland standing in the doorway. He was wearing military-issue fatigues, the same as the rest of the soldiers, but somehow he made them look different, more dangerous. "Toland, shouldn't you be in your quarters?" "Couldn't sleep, too much on my mind." I nodded, understanding. First time off-world. First time out of a cell in 23 years. It's a lot to process. We stood together in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Then Toland said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about having a purpose, something to fight for. Have you figured out what that is?" "I don't know yet, but I'm starting to realize something. All those years in the rig I thought I was being punished, that I deserved everything that was happening to me. But maybe the punishment was just preparation, getting me ready for something I couldn't have done before." "That's a good way to look at it." "I'm not a good man, General. I'll never be a good man, but I can be useful. I can be the weapon they need. And maybe, somewhere along the way, I can become something better." I turned to look at him, seeing the man beneath the killer. "That's all anyone can ask for," I said. "The chance to become something better." The system was called Calith's Fall, and it was already dying. As we emerged from jump space, the view was chaos. Ships burning, planets breaking apart, the debris of what had once been a thriving civilization scattered across the void. The Draken had been here, and they'd left nothing but ruin. "General Cross, we're receiving a transmission from the Council forces." The AI's voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency beneath it. "They're requesting immediate assistance." "Put it on screen." The holographic display flickered, showing a battle-scarred Voltari officer whose skin was a desperate gray-green. "Human vessel, we're grateful for your arrival, but I must warn you, the situation is worse than we expected. The Draken have deployed their ground forces to the third planet. They're converting the population, creating more of themselves. We've lost all contact with the surface." "Copy that," I said. "We're deploying our ground forces now. Hold your position and provide orbital support if you can." The Voltari officer stared at me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "General, with all due respect, we've lost 2 full divisions trying to retake that planet. Your soldiers—" "Are not your soldiers," I interrupted. "Trust me, they know what they're doing." I turned to the intercom, pressing the transmit button. "All hands, this is the General. We're going in. I won't lie to you, this is going to be ugly. The Draken are bio-horrors, creatures that absorb other life forms into themselves. They're deadly, they're relentless, and they don't know how to quit." I paused, letting that sink in. "But neither do we. You are the most dangerous people on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. You've been locked up because civilization couldn't handle what you are. But out here, what you are is exactly what's needed. So go out there, show these bastards what humanity is capable of, and come back alive." The response was a roar that shook the bulkheads. These weren't just prisoners anymore. They were soldiers, and they were ready to fight. The drop pods hit the atmosphere at 17,000 kilometers per hour, and for a few seconds I was weightless, suspended in the void between fear and courage. Then the retro thrusters fired, the pod bucked and screamed, and we slammed into the surface with enough force to rattle every bone in my body. The hatch blew open, and I was the first one out. The planet was dying. The sky was a sickly green, choked with spores and smoke. The ground was covered in organic matter, pulsating with a terrible, rhythmic heartbeat. This was what the Draken did. They turned planets into extensions of themselves, absorbing everything and converting it into more of their kind. "Move, move, move," I shouted, and the soldiers poured out of the pods behind me. They were a terrifying sight. These weren't clean-cut recruits fresh from basic training. These were killers, the kind who'd spent years in the shadows of humanity's worst prisons, hunting their instincts until they were razor-sharp. They moved with a predatory grace, spreading out across the landing zone, covering each other's flanks without being told. I spotted Kate Brennan leading her squad toward a ridge, her movements fluid and precise. She'd been in the rig for 11 years, but she'd never lost her edge. If anything, she'd sharpened it. "Brennan, take your squad and secure the high ground," I ordered. "Toland, you're with me. We're pushing toward the capital city." "Alone?" Toland asked, his voice carrying a hint of dark amusement. "Not alone. We're going in first, and the rest of the force is going to follow our lead." "Right," he checked his weapon, a modified assault rifle that fired armor-piercing rounds. "Let's go kill some monsters." The capital city was a nightmare. Once it had been a center of culture and commerce, home to millions of beings from across the galaxy. Now it was a twisted labyrinth of organic growth and shattered buildings, the streets clogged with the remains of the Draken's victims. We moved through the ruins in silence, our footsteps muffled by the organic carpet that covered everything. The Draken were here. I could feel them, a constant pressure at the edge of my perception. They were waiting, watching, hunting. "They know we're here," Toland murmured, and I nodded. "They're letting us come to them." "Let them?" I pulled a grenade from my belt, arming it with my thumb. "They're expecting soldiers. They're not expecting us." The first wave came from the right, a flood of twisted bodies that seemed to sprout from the walls themselves. They were fast, faster than anything human, their limbs ending in razor-sharp claws and their maws opening wide to reveal rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. But we were faster. I threw the grenade, and the explosion tore through the front ranks, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Behind me, I heard Toland's weapon roar, and the Draken fell in clusters, their bodies exploding under the armor-piercing rounds. Kate Brennan's squad hit them from the side, and I watched in awe as she moved through them like a dancer, her combat knife flashing in the dim light. She didn't just kill the Draken, she dismantled them, using their own momentum against them, turning their attacks into openings that she exploited with brutal efficiency. "General, they're pushing harder," Brennan shouted over the comm. "We've got another wave coming from the north." "Hold the line," I ordered, but even as I said it, I knew we couldn't hold forever. The Draken were endless, pouring out of the ruined buildings, climbing over the bodies of their fallen. Then something changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in the pressure, a change in the quality of the silence. The Draken stopped advancing, their attention turning towards something in the distance. "What is it?" Toland asked, his weapon still trained on the closest horror. "I don't know," I said, "but whatever it is, the Draken are scared of it." And then I saw it. A figure was walking toward us, moving through the Draken ranks like they weren't there. It was human. At least, it had been human once. Now it was something else, something that had been changed by the Draken, absorbed and converted into one of their own. But it wasn't like the others. It was moving with purpose, with intent, and the Draken were stepping aside to let it pass. "General," Brennan said, her voice suddenly tight with recognition. "I know that man. That's Colonel Vargas. He was the commander of the 1st Expeditionary Force. They said he'd been killed." "Looks like he survived," I said grimly, "and now he's one of them." Vargas stopped 100 meters away, his eyes, or what was left of them, fixed on me. "General Cross," he said, and his voice was a terrible echo of what it had once been. "You should not have come here. The Draken cannot be defeated. They can only be absorbed." "I don't believe that," I said, leveling my weapon at him. "You were the best soldier I ever knew, Cole." I watched you lead men into impossible situations and bring them out alive. And you're telling me you just gave up. I didn't give up, he said, and there was something like pain in his voice. I adapted. This is the only way to survive. The Draken absorb everything, but in doing so they become everything. If we let them absorb us, we become part of something larger, something eternal. That's not surviving, I said. That's dying in a way that takes forever. Then you will die the other way, Vargas said, and his form began to shift, growing and changing into something monstrous. And you will join us anyway. The battle that followed was the worst I'd ever seen. Vargas had been transformed into something beyond humanity, a towering nightmare of claws and teeth and organic weaponry that seemed to grow from his body. He was fast, impossibly fast, and he tore through our front lines like they were paper. "Fall back," I shouted. "Bren and Toland cover the retreat." But they didn't retreat. They charged forward, meeting Vargas head-on, and I watched in horror as Toland was thrown back, his armor cracked and bleeding. Brennan was still moving, though, using her speed to evade Vargas's attacks and strike at his weak points. "Brennan, get out of there," I shouted. "No," she screamed back, "he's mine." And then she was on him, her combat knife flashing in the dim light, finding gaps in his organic armor that I hadn't even seen. She was moving faster than I'd ever seen anyone move, and Vargas was on the defensive, giving ground for the first time. But he was still stronger, still more durable, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he wore her down. "Toland, we need to help her." Toland was already moving, climbing to his feet despite his injuries, his weapon trained on Vargas. "I've got one shot," he said. "If I miss." "You won't miss," I said. "You're the best shot I've ever seen." He nodded, and then he fired. The bullet struck Vargas in the chest, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the organic armor began to crack, to splinter, and Vargas let out a scream that echoed across the ruined city. He turned to face Toland, his form flickering, unstable, and I saw my chance. I threw a grenade, aiming for the crack in his armor, and it detonated with a sound that shook the ground. Vargas staggered, his form destabilizing, and Brennan was on him again, her knife finding his throat. "Goodbye, Cole," she said, and then she plunged the blade deep into his neck. Vargas fell, his body dissolving into organic matter, and the Draken around us began to panic. Without their leader, without his will to guide them, they were just animals, dangerous but directionless. "Push forward," I shouted. "Drive them back." And we did. We pushed through the ruins, driving the Draken before us, and by the time the sun rose, what little light could penetrate the spore-choked sky, we had retaken the capital city. The cost had been high. We'd lost almost a third of our force, men and women who'd been given a chance at redemption and had died making the most of it. But we'd won. The Draken were in retreat, driven back from Calith's fall, and the Council forces were securing the system. I stood on the observation deck of the Harbinger, watching the planet below. From here, you couldn't see the devastation, the organic growth that still covered the surface. You could only see the green and blue of a world that might, one day, recover. "We did it, didn't we?" Toland said, coming to stand beside me. He was in a medical sling, his arm broken in 3 places, but he was alive. "We actually won." "Gloriously," I said, and I felt the ghost of a smile on my face. "But it cost us. They were good soldiers, all of them." "Good soldiers," he repeated, and there was something like wonder in his voice. "We're not used to being called that." "You earned it, all of you." Brennan joined us, her clothes still stained with the residue of the Draken's organic matter. "That was something," she said. "I don't know if I can ever go back to being what I was before." "You can't," I said. "None of you can. You've seen things that will haunt you for the rest of your lives. You've done things that will never leave you, but you can use that, build something new from it." "Like what?" she asked. "Like a future, a purpose. You've been killers for so long that you forgot you could be protectors. But today, you were protectors. You saved millions of lives. Toland shook his head slowly. I killed more people today than I did in my entire career before the rig, but somehow it feels different. Because you were fighting for something, I said. Not against something, there's a difference. When we returned to Earth, the reception was overwhelming. News of our victory had preceded us, and the entire planet was celebrating. There were parades, ceremonies, a hero's welcome for soldiers who'd been prisoners just days before. It was surreal, watching these men and women who'd been reviled and feared being treated like saviors. I stood in the parade hall, watching as the soldiers filed past, each one receiving a medal and a handshake from the Earth Command leadership. They looked different than they had when we'd left. Prouder, more confident, like they'd finally found a place where they belonged. "This was a good thing you did, Marcus," Dr. Morrison said, coming to stand beside me. "You gave them purpose. You gave them a reason to live." "I gave them a war," I said. "I gave them the chance to die in a way that made the galaxy notice. That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed, "but it's what they needed. They didn't need redemption. They needed to be seen as something other than monsters, and you gave them that." "Thanks, Helena, but it wasn't just me. They did the work. They proved what they were capable of." "Which is exactly what you knew they would do," she smiled, a rare expression from the normally reserved psychologist. "You saw something in them that no one else did. You gave them a chance to be heroes. And now they have to live with being heroes." "It's not a burden I'd wish on anyone," she said, "but it's better than being a prisoner." Kate Brennan was the last to receive her medal. She walked up to the podium with the same predator's grace she'd shown on the battlefield, her eyes meeting mine as she accepted the honor. "General," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall, "thank you for everything." "I didn't do anything," I said. "You earned this." "Not the medal," she said. The chance to be something more. You gave me that when no one else would." And then she stepped forward and shook my hand, her grip firm and sure. "If you ever need me again," she said, "I'll be there. We all will, because you showed us that we could be more than what we were told we were." Years passed and the Draken threat was finally contained. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and they'd learned to respect and fear our unique capabilities. The soldiers who'd fought at Calith's fall became legends. Some of them went on to lead new squads, training the next generation of humanity's defenders. Others chose to retire, living out their days in the peace they'd earned. Raymond Toland became one of the most decorated officers in the human military, a man who'd gone from prisoner to hero and never looked back. He wrote a book about his experiences, and it became a bestseller on Earth and beyond. Kate Brennan disappeared for a while, but she resurfaced as the commander of a special operations unit that handled the galaxy's most dangerous missions. She'd found her calling, protecting the innocent, even if she had to use dark methods to do it. And me, I stayed in command, watching over the force I'd helped create. The galaxy had needed humanity's strongest soldiers, and Earth had sent its most feared killers. They'd gone to war and come back as something more, something that would never be forgotten. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again, but that was okay. We'd earned their respect, and we'd protect it with everything we had. I've been sitting here for hours now, staring at the stars from my office window. The night sky looks different than it did before, brighter somehow, more alive. I suppose that's because I know what's out there now. I've seen the best and worst of the galaxy, and I've come back to tell the story. The Draken are gone, the galaxy is at peace, and humanity has found its place among the stars. But I'll never forget the moment I looked at a group of killers, the most feared people on Earth, and I asked them to be heroes. And I'll never forget how they answered. The galaxy needed humanity's strongest soldiers, and we sent our worst, our most dangerous, our most broken. And they saved everything. There's a lesson in that, I think, about redemption. Purpose, the power of second chances. But there's another lesson too, one that's harder to put into words. It's about the darkness that lives inside us all, the part we're afraid to look at, the part we try to deny. The Draken were a horror beyond anything humanity had ever faced. But they were also a mirror, showing us who we really were, what we were capable of when the world demanded more than we thought we could give. We gave them everything we had, and somehow it was enough. I think about that every day now. I think about the galaxy out there, full of wonders and terrors I haven't even begun to understand. But I don't feel afraid anymore, because I know what humanity is capable of. We sent our worst to save the galaxy. And we won.